Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. UFC Fight Night Charlotte, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Jailton Almeida just ended, and this is going to be my UFC Fight Night post-fight. Some people are calling it UFC on ABC4, but nonetheless, this is my UFC post-fight. We're mainly going to discuss the main event, but I'm also going to briefly touch on all the other notable fights on the card, including the majority of the main card. Now, before I get into any of that, guys, if you enjoyed these post-fights, make sure to like the video. I would greatly appreciate it. Starting off with the main event, we have Jailton Almeida defeating Jairzinho Rozenstruik via first round submission, first round rear naked choke. And my picks on this card for the entire card weren't particularly good, but my main card picks were really good, and my main event pick was really good. But I can't really pat myself on the back too much for the main event pick because most people pick Jailton Almeida by first or second round submission. But my breakdown leading into this fight was pretty much spot on. I thought Almeida would get a takedown about midway through the round. He would work to get to mount, and then Jairzinho Rozenstruik would give up his back and get choked out late first round rear naked choke. And that's exactly what happened. The only thing in this fight that did not happen in my prediction, and it may have happened, I can't really remember, I recorded it over a week ago now, or roughly a week ago now, is the first takedown by Jailton Almeida was stuffed by Jairzinho Rozenstruik. But he shot immediately, shot from a mile away. He got stuffed. Jairzinho Rozenstruik didn't make him pay for it. Then they just kind of were both tentative on the feet. And then Jailton Almeida I think he threw a kick, shot it on a takedown, got his hands locked right behind the knee of Jairzinho Rozenstruik, or the knees of Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And Jairzinho Rozenstruik felt like he got tabletopped. And for those of you who don't know what that means someone crouches down behind somebody without them knowing, and then somebody else pushes them over them. That's literally how Jairzinho Rozenstruik fell when Jailton Almeida got in on his legs. Really showed no takedown defense when Jailton Almeida had the right entry. And then from there, Jailton Almeida was just working to get out of the half guard. And Rozenstruik was looking over at his coaches. He looked over at his coaches like they betrayed him. Like, how come I couldn't stuff that takedown? And basically all he did was just wrap his legs around the one leg of Almeida that he was able to get control of and tried to avoid getting full mounted. Eventually, they made their way over to the cage. Jairzinho tries to get up, gets his back against the fence. Eventually, essentially gives up like one hook position. As he's in a seated position, Jailton Almeida gets one hook in. Then he goes back to his back, and Jailton Almeida just jumps into the full mount, starts softening him up with ground and pound. Because of the ground and pound, Jairzinho Rozenstruik turns, gives up his back, gets a rear naked choke, or Almeida gets the rear naked choke at the very end of the first round. I think it was 3 minutes and 43 seconds into the first round. He rear naked chokes Jairzinho Rozenstruik. And going into this fight, I was very confident that Almeida would win, but I thought it was kind of a trap fight because Jairzinho Rozenstruik is very big, and Jailton Almeida isn't a particularly big heavyweight. He's not even really a heavyweight. He's just kind of a light heavyweight that's like, you know what? I'm not going to cut weight because the heavyweight division is the least skilled men's division in all the UFC. So I'm going to go up there, I'm going to beat up some bums at heavyweight, and I'm going to cash some paychecks. And that's what he's done thus far. But now he got a big step up in competition against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and he passed it with flying colors. I mean, Jairzinho Rozenstruik is very dangerous on the feet. He does have the grappling deficiencies, which is why I thought the UFC particularly set up this matchup to kind of raise the stock of Jailton Almeida. And that's exactly what happened in this fight. Once he got in on those legs, Rozenstruik couldn't stuff the takedown. Then the jiu-jitsu of Jailton Almeida was just too much for Jairzinho. And Almeida's a serious contender in the heavyweight division because the heavyweight division is not particularly stacked by any means. I mean, you look at the heavyweight division right now, and outside of like the top three, it's really not particularly, good at all. And I honestly think there could be a chance, and Jailton Almeida called him out after the fight, there's a chance they might feed old Tai Tuivasa to Jailton Almeida. And I think Jailton Almeida would beat Tai Tuivasa badly if he can avoid getting clipped early. But you look at the heavyweight division, outside of the top five, really outside the top five, I think it's horrific. I don't think Tai Tuivasa is particularly that great. Almost got KO'd by Greg Hardy. Alexander Volkov is okay. Sergey Spivak is okay. Jairzinho Rozenstruik was number 9, which he's going to lose his spot now. And then you're starting to fall off a cliff. Derek Lewis, Jailton Almeida would absolutely murk Derek Lewis if he doesn't get clipped in the first minute, because Almeida would be able to get him down and submit him. So you look at this weight class, I think Almeida kind of propels himself, in my opinion, to about like the number 6 spot. I would like to see him fight a guy like Tom Aspinall. I would like to see him fight a guy like Curtis Blades. I'd like to see him fight a guy like Stipe Miocic or Sergey Pavlovich or Cyril Gane. I think he beats Cyril Gane. I mean, we've seen what John Jones did to Cyril Gane. He got him down and immediately guillotined him. I mean, it was like, what, a minute and a half? What was it, a little over 2 minutes, something along those lines? So I really do think Almeida has the recipe to be very successful at heavyweight, even though his striking isn't particularly great, because he has the takedown threat and he has the jiu-jitsu and submission threat. I think he beats Cyril Gane, who's ranked number 1. I think he could beat Sergey Pavlovich if he can get him down. Again, it's all about avoiding the power early. And I believe Almeida is in a situation where a lot of people, myself included, thought that John Jones and Alexander Gustafsson were back in like 2014, 2015. I always thought, and it's why I was so excited to see John Jones finally make his heavyweight debut back at UFC 285. I always thought if Jones or Gustafsson went up to heavyweight, obviously Gustafsson ended up falling off a cliff at light heavyweight before he moved up. But I always thought in their primes, if they moved up to heavyweight, I thought they'd be very successful, because the heavyweight division just isn't as skilled as some of these lower weight classes. I mean, the fact that Derek Lewis was fighting for the title at multiple points in his career, I know one was interim, but that tells you all you need to know. Derek Lewis solely relies on power. So Almeida, I think he can blow through Tai Tuivasa. I think he can submit Curtis Blades, because Curtis Blades' striking is okay, but I think Jailton Almeida is comparable, and I think has good power. And I think if Curtis Blades takes him down or tries to take him down, I think he can get submitted by Almeida. I think Stipe Miocic, I mean, he's got one foot in the grave, the other on a banana peel. He's out answering phones at the fire department. He's probably going to lose to John Jones. We're probably never going to see him again. You have Sergey Pavlovich, who, I mean, people like to compare him to Ngannou, but he really has TKO power. He's not sleeping guys. But he has some deficiencies on the ground as well, and he's super one-dimensional. He doesn't throw any kicks. He doesn't mix in the takedowns himself. We saw what Alistair Overeem did to him. So really, any of these guys at the top of the heavyweight division, I think Almeida has a chance against, outside of John Jones. I think John Jones beats Almeida, and I think he beats him pretty handedly. But if John Jones were to get taken down, it would be very, very interesting. And, this fight just proved that if you're mildly skilled at light heavyweight, and you can put a little bit of weight on you and come up to, 230, 235 pounds, you can compete at heavyweight. And you're immediately in the top 10. That's what my opinion is. Because Almeida weighed in, I think, 230 for this fight. And this is the one thing that worried me, because even if you have the skill advantage, the bigger guy is always going to have an advantage. So even if Almeida was a little bit better than Jairzinho, but Jairzinho's bigger, Jairzinho is going to use that size and strength advantage. And honestly, in the cage, Almeida looked massive. He looked absolutely massive, and he only got one takedown stuff, and it was just a sloppy takedown. But at the end of the day, did we really learn anything new? I don't think we learned anything new. We already knew Rozenstruik's takedown defense was lackluster. We already knew his jiu-jitsu was lackluster. We already know Jailton Almeida wants to take you down, wants to submit you, and has world-class jiu-jitsu. And that's exactly what happened in this fight. Rozenstruik now can kind of be resigned. He can go fight Derek Lewis. I think that's the fight to make. I think it's a travesty we have never seen Rozenstruik versus Lewis. Both of those guys are strikers, like to avoid grapplers, like to look for KOs. I think you book those two. They're never going to be towards the top of the division ever. And I think that's the fight that makes sense. But the only thing that does suck about this fight, I don't feel like we learned a whole lot. But I do think we can at least, there's always like a tipping point in someone's career where there's a lot of hype behind them, but you're still not sure. Like Khamzat Chimaev going into that Gilbert Burns fight. Like, he looked really good and he was really dominant, but the level of competition wasn't great. But he did have the win over Li Jingliang. And then he beat Gilbert Burns, and then we're like, okay, Khamzat's the real deal. We know for sure. We already thought it, but we know for sure. This was the tipping point for Almeida's career. We thought he was really good, but we're like, okay, is he going to end up being a fraud the second he gets a big step up in competition? He proved at UFC Fight Night Charlotte that he is the real deal. He gets the submission. And I like his chances against a lot of these heavyweights. I would pick him against Cyril Gane right now. 50-50 on Pavlovich. 50-50 against Miocic. I would pick him over Blades. 50-50 versus Tom Aspinall, but that's the top 5 right there. The only person I would be confident picking against Almeida right now would be Jon Jones. And I think all those fights would be interesting, including the Jon Jones fight. And you're looking at a situation, we're going to move on to some other fights here in a second. You're looking at a situation, if Jones beats Stipe and retires, then Jones and Stipe are out of the picture. You're essentially looking at a Pavlovich, an Aspinall, and Almeida top 5 of the heavyweight division. A combination of those 3 are going to be fighting for the title. And what's awesome for Almeida, because he's not weighing in particularly heavy and not putting on a lot of mass, he can still be very athletic. He can still grapple very well, because typically the larger the heavyweight is, the worse their jiu-jitsu and grappling is. And also, he always has a backup plan. He always has an escape hatch. He starts losing at heavyweight, boom, he goes back down to light heavyweight. He can have a career resurgence there. But I think he proved that he is legit. He can compete with the top 10 of the heavyweight division, which most of us already thought. He made quick work of Jairzinho Rozenstruik, and it was a solid win and a dominant win, and he didn't even get touched. So he's still not taking really any damage in his UFC career. So I can't wait to see what's next for him. I have a feeling they might feed Tai Tuivasa to him. I really do. And I know a lot of Tai Tuivasa fans aren't going to like that, but Tai Tuivasa probably gets submitted by Jailton Almeida. And I don't really think, unless he lands a big shot in the first 2 minutes, I think he's getting taken down and submitted. Moving on to the co-main event, we have Johnny Walker versus Anthony Smith. This was the only pick I got wrong on the main card. Again, I'm hyping myself up a little bit there. My picks for the full card were not particularly great. This fight was just lackluster. I'm going to be honest. I expected a lot more out of both guys. I think Anthony Smith's done. And I don't think Johnny Walker's going anywhere. And I know Johnny Walker got a win. He won, I think he won 29-28. I can't remember the scorecards. I think maybe 2 judges might have had it 30-27. I can't remember the scorecards. Either way, Johnny Walker wins via decision. This fight wasn't that good. Outside of the first round, this fight wasn't very good. The first round, both guys were tentative. Johnny Walker landing some calf kicks, heavy calf kicks. And then at one point, Anthony Smith tries to close the distance, gets clipped with a 2-piece counter, gets hurt badly, starts looking for the takedown. Johnny Walker just slinging hammer fists, punching to the back of the head as Anthony Smith gets in on a leg, starts looking for a takedown. And Johnny Walker's just throwing like crazy and not defending the takedown. He gets taken down. Anthony Smith just lays there. Just lays on top of him, cements the position, locks his hand underneath, cements the position. And then he doesn't, like, he has opportunities to throw down ground and pound. And instead he's staring off into the crowd like he doesn't even know where he's at. He's like, how did I get here? The round ends, or actually Johnny Walker works his way back to his feet with the last 5 seconds and then takes down Anthony Smith at like the last second of the round. Second round, they both come out. Johnny Walker looks gassed. Anthony Smith looks gassed. Johnny Walker's landed some leg kicks. Anthony Smith's landed some good shots on the feet, landed some bigger punches. Johnny Walker's essentially just sitting in neutral for the entire second round. Lands a couple leg kicks, but Anthony Smith lands some good punches. Still doesn't look completely recovered. And then the second round ends basically uneventful. I thought Anthony Smith clearly took the second round, landed the better shots on the feet, but still having trouble closing the distance. Every time he tries to close the distance, he's kind of landing on the chest, landing on the shoulders, just missing by like 2 inches when he's trying to target the chin of Johnny Walker. And then you have the third round. The third round was kind of a weird round. Johnny Walker obviously was a little bit more urgent in the third round. I think his corner probably told him to be a little bit more urgent. He was throwing the leg kicks repeatedly, chopping the legs. And then at one point, it was hard to tell exactly what happened. Anthony Smith looked completely defeated in the third round. And I think Johnny Walker landed a couple punches. It looked like on the head of Anthony Smith, but it was hard. They didn't show a replay. Next thing you know, Anthony Smith's down on all fours. He's just down on all fours, curled up, not defending himself. And Johnny Walker's so careless with his shots. Some of the punches were landing to the back of the head. He was just swinging a little bit wildly. Then he starts throwing some baby uppercuts as Anthony Smith's just laying there. Eventually, Anthony Smith tries to go for a takedown, doesn't get it, ends up on his back. And then Johnny Walker kicks the leg a couple times. And then finally, the ref stands him up. And then towards the end of the fight, it just looked like Anthony Smith was done. Walker looked tired. But it just seemed like any shot, especially because of the leg kicks, any shot that Johnny Walker, if he started putting some combinations together, I think he could have finished Anthony Smith in the third round. And even at the tail end, it literally looked like Anthony Smith was about to fall over. And Johnny Walker gets the win. He wins via decision. But I think it's a totally uninspired performance. I think Anthony Smith, I don't know if it's coming off the injury. I don't know if it's the age. He didn't look like he belonged in there. He looked horrible, honestly. And honestly, as horrible as Anthony Smith looked, he looked like a dead corpse. I think Johnny Walker, I understand he doesn't want to rush in and get KO'd, but I'm not impressed with the performance at all. I think he had Anthony Smith out of there multiple times throughout this fight, and he couldn't capitalize and finish him. And Johnny Walker's a guy like he's not the particularly greatest grappler, and he's not the best technical striker. What he's just good at is just finding openings for like crazy techniques and hurting guys and rocking guys. And then when they shoot in on takedowns and they hold on to his leg like Paul Craig did and Anthony Smith did in this fight, he just lights them up with hammer fist. And I just don't know how far that's going to take him. He's talking to Jamal Hill outside of the cage afterwards. We've seen what Jamal Hill did to him, straight up just slept him badly, posterized him, for lack of a better word. And I just don't think beating up the dead corpse of Anthony Smith, even though I picked Anthony Smith going into this fight, I just think, it was uneventful. It wasn't particularly impressive. And, I'm not I was higher on Johnny Walker before this fight. And now his stock lowered in my mind. Even though he beat Anthony Smith, who's usually game. I thought going into that third round after Anthony Smith took the second round, I said, okay, Anthony Smith's going to win this fight. Because Anthony Smith, the longer the fight goes on, the better he is. I don't know if when he got rocked badly in the first round, if he just never recovered and he was just stuck in neutral himself. But he literally seemed like, when a character in a movie gets stabbed and they're like bleeding and you think they're going to die, but the show's trying to string you along whether or not they're going to live or die, and they're moving really slow, and they're trying to run away from a villain, and they're falling down on the ground, and you're like, oh no, get up, and we got to get out of here. That's how Anthony Smith fought for the entirety of the third round. That's how he fought for the entirety of the third round. And Johnny Walker, I felt like at any moment could have finished him, but he didn't. Johnny Walker had great feints in this fight. He always has good feints. He had good leg kicks. He had good distance control. But overall, I thought this could have been a real statement performance for Johnny Walker. If he went out there and KO'd Anthony Smith in that third round, he puts himself in position for a big fight next, but he wasn't able to do that. I think the UFC sacrifices Johnny Walker to Alex Pereira in his next fight. I think that is what happens next. And I think Alex Pereira, as long as his chin isn't completely gone, I think he's probably going to chin Johnny Walker. But you never know, because Johnny Walker's so athletic and so unorthodox and just finds a way to land and hurt guys. But overall, I think Anthony Smith, it's time for him to retire. He took off his gloves afterwards, but he didn't retire. I think it's time for him to retire. I think Johnny Walker, at least he didn't take a whole lot of damage in this fight, so that's a plus. But I just think it could have been a better performance overall. Moving down the card, Ian Machado Garry versus Daniel Rodriguez. Ian Machado Garry, clean performance, KOs him in the first round. Daniel Rodriguez was a big step up in competition, and he outclassed him. Daniel Rodriguez had some good pressure, didn't really land any real clean shots. Ian Garry catches him with a head kick, hurts him, follows him to the ground and pound finish. Ian Garry looked good, and Daniel Rodriguez, while he's not the elite of the elite, he's kind of like, a gatekeeper for the top 15. And Daniel Rodriguez is no bum by any means. And Ian Garry went out there and dispatched him like he didn't even belong there. And I think Ian Machado Garry is so young, and I think he's rapidly improving. And I think he thinks he's better than he is, but he is very skilled. And he has very good technical striking ability. And he throws a lot of straight shots. And he's not winding up with these crazy shots similar to what Daniel Rodriguez was doing. And I just think it's very effective. But I'm interested to see where his grappling is. And he calls out Neil Magny in his hairline afterwards. I think it's a perfect fight to figure out where Ian Garry is, because we've never seen his grappling tested. Neil Magny's not a Khamzat Chimaev by any means, but he can expose guys who don't have that grappling defense that they need. So I think that's an interesting matchup. I know Neil Magny has a fight, I think, with Philip Rowe coming up. But Ian Machado Garry, I don't know why I keep messing that up now. I think he looked good, and I think this was a standout performance for him. To have his toughest test and win it so impressively, I think propels him. He's going to be in the top 15. I don't know if he can compete with the elite of the elite. I still don't know where his grappling is. But to go out there against a guy like Daniel Rodriguez and put him away like that, I think in the first round too, and he didn't even get touched in this fight, In the Keenan Song fight, he got touched. In the Jordan Williams fight, he got touched, And he went out there, he didn't even get touched really by Daniel Rodriguez. And beat him up, TKO'd him in the first round. Good distance management, good technical striking, and good shot selection, and good movement. dealing with the pressure of Daniel Rodriguez against his best opponent. I can't wait to see who Ian Garry fights next. For me, and this is never going to happen, for me, I want to see Ian Garry versus Jack Della Maddalena, who's fighting Sean Brady upcoming. I want to see that fight. Maybe that's a fight we'll see in the future when they're both in the top 5. But usually when you think like that, the fights never happen. But Ian Garry looked very impressive against Daniel Rodriguez. KOs him or TKOs him in the first round off a head kick. Moving down the card, Carlos Ulberg versus Iho Potieria. This was a fight where exactly what I thought would happen happened. Carlos Ulberg, much better striker, clips him in the first round, lands a left hook, hurts him badly. He goes face down into the fence, then lands on the mat, is kissing the mat. Keith Peterson could have jumped in at any moment. Then Ulberg essentially lands like 17 ground and pound shots, and Potieria, his hands are against the mat, his lips are against the mat, and Keith Peterson's just eating a Marlboro Red off to the side, eating a cigarette like a chip, and just standing there not doing anything. And Ulberg's just ground and pounding away, just smacking Ihor's head all across the mat, which I didn't mind too much because what he did to Shogun Rua. But at some point, I mean, you got to stop the fight. And Keith Peterson's just too busy over there instead of actually doing his job. I know John Anik and a lot of the MMA community likes to act like Keith Peterson's some gold standard as a ref. He's a horrible ref. The reffing was horrible tonight. The commentary was horrible tonight. The judging was horrible. Not that horrible, actually. Just the officiating in general was horrible tonight. And Keith Peterson was horrible in this fight. Could have stopped it 15 seconds before it was actually stopped. Luckily, even though Ulberg threw about 17 strikes, not all of them landed, but it was unnecessary damage. And finally, Ulberg just pulls off of him, just walks away. Keith Peterson's just content standing there, not doing anything. Ulberg pulls off of him. Keith Peterson finally steps in. He realized, oh, he pulled off of him, and this guy's still face down on the mat. I better stop this. And he got in there and waved it off. So, horrible stoppage. Didn't seem like anyone was really talking about that too much, so I wanted to harp on it in this post-fight. But Ulberg looked really good, but against what level of competition? I think he's evolving. I think his striking is very good. And he's in the light heavyweight division, which isn't particularly stacked. So can't wait to see where he goes from here. Moving down the card, you have Alex Morono versus Tim Means. First round, first 2 minutes of the first round, looked like Alex Morono was kind of pulling out ahead. He was landing the better shots. But then as the round went on, Tim Means was landing some body shots, landing some leg kicks. And it started to seem like the momentum was going Tim Means' way. And then towards the end of the round, Tim Means had a flurry, landed some good shots, landed some good knees to the body. And I thought Tim Means stole the round. First round, he won at 10-9. Second round, Alex Morono came out a little bit more aggressive. It seemed like, he's fighting more towards what he was fighting in the beginning of the first round, throwing some good shots. Then he throws a spinning back fist. And also, I think in the second round, Tim Means took him down for a little bit, but Morono popped right back up. And then eventually Morono throws a spinning back fist. Tim Means ducks under it, looks for a takedown. Morono just latches up a guillotine. They go to the ground. Morono taps him out. Solid performance by Morono, but honestly, I'm disappointed. I mean, the way he looked against Santiago Ponzinibbio, was almost beating Santiago Ponzinibbio until he got finished in the third round. I thought he would look more impressive against Tim Means, and he just really didn't look all that impressive. But it was a slick finishing sequence. And, some guys just have off nights. So I think it's a solid win for Alex Morono. I'm curious where he goes in the welterweight division. He called out Brian Barberena afterwards. I think that's the fight that's going to happen. But Tim Means getting up there in age. Alex Morono, just snatches on an opportunity. I mean, Tim Means ducked under the spinning back fist, looked for a takedown. Morono snapped up the guillotine so fast. Great finish for Alex Morono, and I love the Brian Barberena matchup next. And that's pretty much the main card. We had Matt Brown, KO, and Court McGee. I think they both need to retire. The UFC broadcast made it seem like Court McGee went out cold, but he got clipped with, I think it was a right hand, and then he just fell to the ground and said, I don't want no more. He was still awake. He was not KO'd. He was done. Both of these guys are just too old to be competing. I know people are going to say, well, Matt Brown got a finish. Matt Brown, if you saw Matt Brown in like 2015, 2016, 2014, I'll never forget when he fought Robbie Lawler. It was basically like a number one contender fight at the time. I'll never forget when he fought Johnny Hendricks and got out grappled. Matt Brown at 42 years old, I mean, if it wasn't Court McGee, if he fights any of these guys in the welterweight division that are even close to like the top 20, I think Matt Brown's getting flatlined badly. So I'm happy he got a win. I wish he would retire. He said he's going to come back. Hopefully the UFC gives him some type of layup fight, and then we end the career of Matt Brown after that, because I don't want to see, I'm tired of these guys who stick around for too long and just get KO'd again and again and again. It's super depressing. I want Matt Brown to leave on a high note because he's one of my favorite fighters to watch. And I don't want to see him end being KO'd repeatedly. But I think that pretty much does it for the full card. I mean, Gabe Green also on the prelims. He rushed in. Bryan Battle brutally KO'd him in the first round. Gabe Green came out, shot out like a cannon. And yeah, I mean, Bryan Battle backed up, counter-struck well, landed a shot right on the chin, slept Gabe Green out cold. And outside of that, don't really care to talk about any of the other fights too much. I don't want to make this video too long. There was some weird officiating in the Cody Stamann fight where there was an up kick illegally after Cody Stamann got a takedown. And then the ref didn't put him back in the position and didn't take a point. There were some weird point deductions in the Mandy Bohm fight. Mandy Bohm Aljo'd her way to a win, which was super unfortunate. And then Jessa Rose Clark in the opening fight needs to be absolutely cut. Horrible performance. And then Carl Williams beats Chase Sherman. So there you go. I talked about every fight on this video. Carl Williams versus Chase Sherman. I think both of them didn't look particularly good. Carl Williams gets the win. I didn't have a problem with the decision. I think some people thought Chase Sherman won. I don't think either guy looked particularly good. It's the heavyweight division. What are you going to do? But let me know what you guys thought about UFC Fight Night Charlotte down in the comments. Who do you want to see Jailton Almeida fight next? I'm genuinely curious on that. And also, what did you think of Johnny Walker's performance? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.